Roman Black was not asleep. He was pretending to be, waiting to see what the maid's 5-year-old son would do when no one was watching. His eyes were closed. His breathing was heavy. His body was sunk into the leather of his office chair. To anyone watching, he looked like a powerful man lost in dreams. But behind those closed lids, Roman was razor-sharp, calculating, hunting. Behind him, the safe stood wide open, deliberately. Stacks of $100 bills glowed in the afternoon light. A loaded pistol rested on the desk. Somewhere in this room, a little boy named Jack was hiding, told by his terrified mother to be invisible. Roman was testing him, and by the end of it, the most feared Mafia boss in the city, the man who trusted no one, would be frozen in place by what that child did next. Roman Black was 52 years old. He ran an empire stretching from the dockyards to the downtown high-rises. The snake tattoo coiled on his neck wasn't decoration. It was a reminder. He'd gotten it at 19, the night he killed his first betrayer. Since then, the list of traitors had grown long. His own lieutenants had tried to put bullets in his back. Twice. His cousins had plotted to poison him. Even women who'd shared his bed had sold his secrets to rivals. Roman had learned the only lesson that mattered. Every person had a price. Every smile hid a knife. Given the chance, anyone would betray you. Today he would prove it again, using a child. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps us make more stories like this one. Now, back to Roman. The boy's mother was Amelia, his newest maid. Roman knew everything about her. 29 years old, widow, husband dead from a construction accident, drowning in debt, raising Jack alone. Today the babysitter had canceled. Amelia couldn't afford to miss a shift. She'd begged to bring her son. The head housekeeper's warning had been ice cold. If Mr. Black sees that child, you're both gone. And in this house, gone doesn't just mean fired. Minutes ago, Roman had listened as Amelia positioned Jack behind a large plant, her voice trembling with terror. "Don't move! Don't touch anything! That man is Mr. Black! If you wake him, if he sees you—" Her voice cracked. "We'll lose everything. No food, no home. Mommy needs you to be invisible." And then, a small voice, so gentle it barely stirred the air. "Okay, Mommy, I'll be invisible." Now her footsteps were gone. The door had clicked shut. And it was just the two of them. The Mafia boss and the boy. The grandfather clock ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Sunlight caught the towers of cash, making them glow like something from a dream. The gun gleamed, dark and waiting. Roman listened for the sounds he expected. Small feet creeping closer. Fingers reaching for money. The sharp breath of a child seeing a real gun for the first time. He'd run this test before, on maids, drivers, even men who'd sworn blood oaths. Almost everyone failed. Almost everyone reached for what wasn't theirs. A poor child would be no different. Jack had probably never seen so much money in his life. He'd probably never seen a real gun. Roman waited for proof that humanity was rotten, even at 5 years old. But the boy didn't reach for the money. He did something no one in Roman's dark world had ever done before. Something that made Roman Black's eyes fly open, not in anger, not in triumph, but in complete and utter shock. If that satisfying twist just caught your breath, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because what this little boy does will change Roman Black forever. Amelia's hands were shaking before she even reached the mansion gates. She clutched Jack's small fingers tighter as they hurried up the long gravel driveway, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped animal. The babysitter had called at 6 a.m., voice thick with apology. Something about a family emergency, so sorry, can't make it today. Amelia had stared at her phone in the gray morning light, feeling the walls of her tiny apartment close in around her. She couldn't miss this shift. She couldn't. Last month's rent was already late. The landlord's final warning sat crumpled in her purse. $3.47. That's what remained in her bank account until payday. If she lost this job, she and Jack would be sleeping in her car by Friday, and the car was nearly out of gas. So she did the only thing she could do. She dressed Jack in his cleanest clothes, packed his favorite toy, a small rubber dinosaur, and prayed to God that no one would notice him. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, noticed immediately. "Absolutely not!" The older woman's face went pale when she saw Jack hiding behind Amelia's legs. "Are you out of your mind? Mr. Black despises children. He despises noise. He despises anything that disrupts his routine." "Please." Amelia's voice cracked. "I have no one else. He'll be quiet. I swear he'll be invisible. Just let me put him in the kitchen. He won't move. He won't make a sound." Mrs. Patterson stared at her for a long, terrible moment. Then her eyes dropped to Jack, to his worn shoes, his too big jacket, his wide brown eyes that held far too much understanding for a 5-year-old. "The kitchen," she said finally, her voice hard. "He stays in the corner behind the pantry. If Mr. Black sees him, if he even hears him, you're both gone. And I mean gone, Amelia. Do you understand what that means in this house?" Amelia understood. Everyone who worked for Roman Black understood. She settled Jack in the kitchen corner with his dinosaur and a stern whisper. "Don't move, baby. Mommy will be back soon." For 2 hours, everything went perfectly. Amelia dusted, polished, scrubbed, moving through the mansion like a ghost, checking on Jack every 15 minutes. He sat exactly where she'd left him, quiet as a church mouse, making his dinosaur walk silently across his knee. Then Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Black's office, now. He's requested a full cleaning." Amelia's stomach dropped. "But he's in there?" "He's sleeping in his chair. Be silent. Be invisible. Get it done." Amelia rushed to the kitchen to check on Jack one final time, but the corner was empty. The dinosaur lay abandoned on the floor, her blood turned to ice. And then she heard it. Small footsteps, somewhere down the hall, heading toward the one room in the mansion where her son absolutely could not be. Amelia caught Jack just outside Roman Black's office door. She grabbed his arm, maybe too hard, and pulled him against her hip, clamping a hand over his mouth before he could make a sound. Her eyes were wild, her breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her voice barely a whisper. "I told you to stay in the kitchen." Jack's eyes were wide and sorry. "I wanted to find you, Mommy. I got scared alone." Amelia's heart shattered and raced all at once. She didn't have time for this. Mrs. Patterson's orders echoed in her skull. Mr. Black's office, now. She couldn't leave Jack in the hallway. Someone would see him. She couldn't take him back to the kitchen. There was no time. She had no choice. "You stay right behind me," she breathed, gripping his shoulders. "You don't move. You don't speak. You don't even breathe loud. Do you understand?" Jack nodded, his small face serious. Amelia pushed open the heavy oak door, and her blood turned to ice. Roman Black sat slumped in his leather chair, eyes closed, chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of sleep. That alone would have stopped her heart. But what she saw behind him made her legs nearly buckle. The safe was open, wide open. Towers of cash stacked inside like bricks of gold, wrapped in yellow bands, catching the afternoon light. More money than Amelia would earn in 10 lifetimes. Just sitting there, exposed. As if he'd forgotten to close it before drifting off. And on the desk beside his hand, a gun. Black steel, gleaming utterly still. Amelia knew the rules. Everyone who worked in this house knew the rules. Never enter when Mr. Black is present. Never look at the safe. Never touch anything on his desk. Never ask questions. Never, ever give him a reason to notice you. But he was asleep, and she had her orders. And if she didn't clean this room, she'd be fired anyway. She motioned sharply for Jack to sit in the far corner, near the bookshelf. hidden in shadow. Then she grabbed her dusting cloth and crept toward the far side of the room, moving like a woman walking through a minefield. Every few seconds, she glanced back at her son. Jack sat where she'd placed him, but he wasn't looking at her. His eyes were moving, studying, taking in the room the way only curious children do. First, he looked at the stacks of money in the safe. His head tilted slightly, like he was trying to understand what he was seeing. Then his gaze shifted to the gun on the desk. His little body went still. Even at 5, he knew that shape. He knew it was dangerous. And then, God help her, Jack looked at the man in the chair, at Roman Black's closed eyes, at his tight tie, at his completely motionless body. And slowly, quietly, Jack stood up. Jack was still wearing the yellow cleaning gloves. Amelia had let him help in the kitchen that morning. It made him feel important, kept him quiet. The gloves were comically oversized, flopping past his tiny wrists like cartoon hands. She'd forgotten to take them off. Now, as Jack stood up and began walking toward Roman Black, those bright yellow gloves were the only spot of color in the dark room. Amelia saw him move. Her heart stopped dead. She opened her mouth to call out, but the sound died in her throat. If she yelled, she'd wake Roman. If she ran across the room, her footsteps would echo on the hardwood. Either way, the monster would open his eyes. All she could do was watch in frozen horror as her 5-year-old son waddled toward the most dangerous man in the city. Jack stopped right beside Roman's chair. He studied the man's face the way children study everything, without fear, without judgment, with pure and fearless curiosity. His head tilted to one side, then the other. His little brow furrowed. Roman felt the boy's presence like heat from a flame. Every nerve in his body screamed to open his eyes, to end this test, to see what the child was doing. But he forced himself to stay still, to wait, to listen. He expected small fingers reaching for the cash. He expected the rustle of bills being stuffed into pockets. What he heard instead was a tiny voice, barely louder than a breath. "Mister, your tie is too tight. Your face looks all squished." Roman's chest seized, and then he felt it, small hands touching his neck, clumsy, gentle. The rubbery fumbling of oversized gloves working at his silk tie, loosening the knot with the unpracticed care only a child could offer. The tie loosened. Roman could breathe easier, and he hadn't even realized he'd been uncomfortable. Jack stepped back, satisfied with his work. Then his eyes drifted to the safe behind the chair. The heavy steel door was slowly swinging on its hinges, creaking toward the wall. If it banged shut, it would make a terrible noise. It would wake the sleeping man. Jack's little face grew serious. He walked to the safe, past the towers of money, past the stacks of $100 bills, and pressed his small body against the door. He planted his feet, spread his arms wide, and held it still. He was standing guard, not guarding the money, guarding the man's sleep. Roman listened to the soft sound of the boy's breathing, the tiny shuffling of his feet finding balance, the complete absence of greed, of theft, of anything he had expected. And somewhere deep inside Roman Black, in a place he thought had died 30 years ago, something cracked, something shifted. He didn't understand it yet. But in that moment, with a child's yellow-gloved hands holding back a safe door to protect a stranger's rest, the Mafia boss felt his throat tighten for the first time in decades. Roman Black opened his eyes. Not slowly, not groggily. He erupted from that chair like a demon rising from the pit, eyes blazing, voice thundering, every inch of him radiating the kind of fury that made grown men wet themselves. "What is this?" The roar shook the walls. Amelia screamed. Jack stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, the yellow gloves flailing as he fell. Amelia lunged for him, scooping him into her arms and dropping to her knees in one desperate motion. "Mr. Black, please, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Roman was on his feet now, towering over them like a colossus of rage. His face was twisted, terrifying. The snake tattoo on his neck seemed to writhe with every word. You bring a child into my private office? You let him touch me while I sleep? He didn't mean... He wasn't trying to... My safe is open. Roman gestured wildly at the gaping steel door, the towers of cash gleaming behind him. Who opened it? Who touched it? No one. I swear on my life, on my son's life. We didn't touch anything. Roman stepped closer, his shadow swallowing them whole. Amelia clutched Jack so tight the boy could barely breathe. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through her foundation. Jack was trembling against her chest, his small body shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Please, Amelia sobbed. Please, Mr. Black. He's just a boy. He doesn't understand. I'll do anything. I'll work for free. Just please don't hurt him. Roman heard footsteps behind him. Heavy. Fast. His men appeared in the doorway, 2 of them stone-faced, hands already resting on the weapons at their hips. They'd heard the shouting. They were awaiting orders. One word from Roman, and this woman and her child would disappear. One nod, and they'd never be seen again. That's how things worked in his world. That's how they'd always worked. Roman looked down at the sobbing maid and her terrified son. The boy was staring up at him with huge, wet eyes, not with hatred, not with defiance, but with pure, uncomprehending fear. His tiny hand still wore those ridiculous yellow gloves. His lower lip was trembling. And yet, the boy wasn't crying. Even now, even facing a monster, Jack wasn't making a sound. He was trying to be brave, trying to protect his mother by being invisible, just like she'd asked. Something twisted in Roman's gut. He ignored it. He had a role to play. Give me one reason, Roman growled, his voice dropping to something almost worse than shouting, a cold, quiet menace. One reason why I shouldn't make you both disappear tonight. Amelia's sobs grew louder. She had no answer. No defense. No cards left to play. But Jack, small, trembling, terrified Jack, slowly reached into the pocket of his little shorts. Roman held up his hand, stopping Jack's movement. Don't, he said, his voice like ice. Don't move. Jack froze, his small fingers still halfway into his pocket. Amelia pulled him closer, shielding him with her body, her sobs turning to desperate, hiccuping gasps. Roman turned to the safe. He made a show of counting, his lips moving, his finger pointing at each stack of bills. Then he stopped. His jaw tightened. When he turned back to face them, his eyes were murder. $10,000, he said quietly. $10,000 is missing from this safe. Amelia's face went white. No, that's not possible. Are you calling me a liar? Roman's voice cracked like a whip. In my own house? In my own office? We didn't take anything. Amelia's voice rose to a shriek. I swear to you, I swear on my son's life, we never touched that safe. I could never. Then the boy took it. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Roman's gaze dropped to Jack, to his oversized yellow gloves, his tear-streaked face, his tiny body trembling against his mother's chest. Children are quick, Roman continued, his tone almost conversational now, almost pleasant. Quick and greedy. He saw the money. He took what he wanted. It's in his pockets right now. He's 5 years old, Amelia screamed. He doesn't even know what money is. Please, you have to believe me. The crime demands punishment. Roman snapped his fingers. His men stepped forward, their footsteps heavy on the hardwood. One of them reached toward Amelia. She scrambled backward, dragging Jack with her until her back hit the wall, and there was nowhere left to go. This was it. This was the moment Roman had been waiting for. Now she would offer herself. Now the begging would turn to bargaining. Take me instead. I'll do anything. Anything you want. He'd seen it 100 times before. The moment when desperation stripped away every pretense of dignity, when people revealed the ugly, selfish core that lived inside all of them. He waited for it. Amelia looked up at him, tears streaming, body shaking, and said nothing. She just held her son tighter, curling around him like a shield, ready to take whatever was coming. No bargaining, no offers, just a mother protecting her child. Roman felt something flicker in his chest. He crushed it. "Well?" he demanded. "Nothing to say? No deals to make?" Amelia shook her head. Beyond words, beyond reason. But then, movement. Jack wriggled free of his mother's grip. He stepped forward, away from her protective arms, and stood directly in front of Roman Black. His small body was trembling, his yellow gloves were shaking, but his eyes were steady. And slowly, deliberately, he reached into his pocket. Roman expected stolen cash. He expected the boy to pull out crumpled bills, stuffed greedily into his little pockets. He expected proof, finally, undeniably, that even children were thieves at heart. That innocence was a lie, that his worldview was correct. What Jack pulled out was a piece of paper, crumpled, folded, soft at the edges from being handled too many times, carried too many places, loved too fiercely by small hands. Jack unfolded it carefully, like it was made of glass. Then he held it up toward Roman with trembling arms. It was a crayon drawing. A man. Stick-figure arms, stick-figure legs. A too big head with a wobbly circle for a face. And on that face, a huge, lopsided smile drawn in bright yellow crayon. Around the figure, a child's attempt at a heart, colored in red and purple, messy and overlapping. At the bottom, in shaky letters that barely qualified as writing, D-A-D-Y. "This is my daddy," Jack whispered. His voice was so small it barely stirred the air. "He went to heaven. Mommy said he's watching me from the stars now." Roman couldn't move. "It's my favorite thing," Jack continued, his little arms still extended, the drawing quivering in his grip. "I keep it with me always so Daddy stays close. But—" His lower lip trembled. A single tear slid down his cheek. "But you can have it, to pay for the money." The room was silent. Completely, utterly silent. Even Roman's men had stopped breathing. "Please don't be mad at Mommy." Jack's voice cracked, but he didn't lower his arms. He kept holding that drawing up like an offering to a god. "She's really nice. She works really hard. She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. But she always makes me breakfast, and she always says she loves me, and she never yells even when I make mistakes." Roman stared at the drawing, at the crooked smile, at the word Dottie, written by hands too small to spell it right. At this child, this tiny, trembling, terrified child, offering up the only thing he had in the world, not to save himself, to save his mother. "Please, mister." Jack's arms were shaking badly now, exhausted from holding the paper up, but he didn't lower them. "Take my daddy. Just don't hurt my mommy." Roman Black had watched men die without flinching. He had ordered executions over dinner. He had built an empire on blood and bullets and betrayal, and he had never, not once in 30 years, felt his throat close up like this. But now, staring at a 5-year-old boy offering a dead man's portrait to pay a debt that didn't exist, Roman couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move. Behind him, his men shifted uncomfortably. They'd never seen their boss like this. They'd never seen anyone break Roman Black. But this child just had. Roman Black had killed 17 men. He had watched rivals beg for their lives and felt nothing. He had ordered executions between bites of steak. He had seen empires burn, some by his hand, and never lost a night's sleep. But standing in his office, staring at a crumpled crayon drawing held up by a 5-year-old boy, Roman Black could not move. The room was silent except for Amelia's choked sobs behind him. His men stood frozen in the doorway, waiting for orders that weren't coming. The grandfather clock ticked. The afternoon light caught the towers of cash in the safe, making them glow like fool's gold. And Jack just stood there, arms trembling, tears streaming, still holding up his dead father's portrait like a sacrifice on an altar. Take my daddy. Just don't hurt my mommy. Something stirred in Roman's chest. Something old. Something he thought he'd killed decades ago, buried so deep it could never claw its way back. But it was clawing now. He saw himself at 5 years old. Hungry. Terrified. Holding his own mother's hand while men with guns argued about what to do with them. He remembered the helplessness. The desperate need to protect someone he loved when he had nothing, absolutely nothing, to offer. This boy was him. 30 years ago, this boy was him. Roman's hand moved before he could stop it. He reached out, slowly, gently, and lowered Jack's trembling arms. The drawing stayed clutched in those tiny yellow-gloved fingers. "Keep it," Roman said. His voice was hoarse, broken. He barely recognized it. Jack blinked up at him, confused. Amelia's sobs caught in her throat. Roman turned to his men. They stared at him like they'd never seen him before. Maybe they hadn't. "Get out," he said quietly. "Now." They hesitated for half a second, then vanished, pulling the door shut behind them. Roman turned back to Amelia. She was still on the floor, shaking. Mascara streaked down her face, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her body together. "There's no missing money," Roman said. Amelia's crying stopped. She stared at him, uncomprehending. "The safe was staged. I opened it myself." Roman's jaw tightened. "I wasn't asleep. I was watching, listening, testing you." "Testing?" Amelia's voice was barely a whisper. "Testing us?" "I wanted to see if you'd steal, if your boy would steal." Roman looked down at Jack, at those huge, innocent eyes still wet with tears. "I wanted proof that everyone is corrupt, that given the chance, anyone will betray you." He paused, swallowed hard. "Instead, your son loosened my tie because I looked uncomfortable. He guarded my safe so the door wouldn't bang and wake me. And when I accused him of theft, he offered me the only thing he owns to save his mother." Roman's voice cracked on the last word. "You passed," he said. "Both of you. In a way I never imagined possible." Roman made Amelia an offer she couldn't refuse, but not the kind his enemies received. "You'll work for me," he said, still standing in that office, the afternoon light fading around them. "Real hours, real wages, 3 times what you're making now." Amelia stared at him, tears still drying on her cheeks. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand. "Health insurance," Roman continued. "Full coverage, for you and the boy, and an apartment. 2 bedrooms, safe neighborhood, in a building I own. Rent-free." "Why?" The word escaped Amelia's lips before she could stop it. "Why would you do this?" Roman looked down at Jack, who was still clutching the crayon drawing against his chest, watching the adults with wide, uncertain eyes. "In exchange," Roman said slowly, "you bring the boy to visit me. Once a week, Saturdays." Amelia's arms tightened around her son instinctively. "Visit you? For what?" Roman didn't have a good answer. Not one that made sense, anyway. He told himself it was research. A chance to study this strange creature called innocence, to understand how a child could remain uncorrupted in a world designed to break everyone. But that was a lie, and somewhere deep down, Roman knew it. "Do we have a deal?" he asked. Amelia hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. The first Saturday, Jack arrived holding a new drawing, Roman's mansion, colored in gray and black, with a tiny yellow sun in the corner. He presented it solemnly, like a diplomat offering a treaty. Roman hung it on his office wall. The second Saturday, Jack brought questions. "Why do you have a snake on your neck?" Roman touched the tattoo reflexively. "To remind me to be strong." "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore." The third Saturday, harder questions came. "Do bad guys ever get scared?" Roman set down his whiskey glass. considered lying, decided not to. "Yes," he said, "all the time." Jack nodded thoughtfully, as if this made perfect sense. Then, "Do you have a mommy?" Roman's chest tightened. "I did, a long time ago." "What happened to her?" "She went to heaven, like your daddy." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed the room, climbed onto the leather couch beside Roman, and leaned his small body against the Mafia boss's arm. "Maybe they're friends now," Jack whispered, "up in the stars." Roman couldn't speak. He just sat there, feeling the warmth of this child pressed against him. This tiny human who asked impossible questions and accepted impossible answers, and never, ever flinched away. Months passed. The drawings multiplied across Roman's walls. The questions kept coming, about life, death, fear, love, monsters, and heroes. Jack asked them all without judgment, and Roman answered them all without lies. Somewhere in those months, something shifted. The snake began to shed its skin, and Roman Black, killer, crime lord, monster, started learning how to be human again. 15 years later, Roman Black knew he was going to die. He was 67 now. His hair had gone silver. His hands weren't as steady as they used to be, and his lieutenants, the wolves he'd kept at bay for decades, could smell the weakness. They were circling, meeting in secret, making plans. Roman knew about all of it. He'd always known. But he didn't fight it. Not this time. Because Roman Black had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. Quietly, carefully, he had untangled himself from the empire of blood he'd built. He'd moved his legitimate assets, the investments, the properties, the clean money, into untouchable trusts. He'd gathered evidence on every lieutenant who had ever betrayed him, sealed it in envelopes, and placed them with lawyers who couldn't be bought. And he'd watched Jack grow up. The boy was 20 now. Tall, strong, studying law at a university Roman had anonymously funded. Jack still visited every Saturday, though now they talked about cases instead of cartoons, about justice instead of dinosaurs. The drawings on Roman's wall had been replaced by photographs: Jack's graduation, Jack's first internship, Jack smiling with his mother in front of their apartment. Amelia had never stopped being grateful. But Jack had simply loved him, without condition, without agenda, the way Roman had forgotten people could. The assassination came on a Tuesday evening. 3 men, silenced pistols. They found Roman in his office, sitting in his leather chair, facing the door. He didn't run. He didn't beg. He just looked at them with those cold gray eyes and said, "Tell them the snake finally sleeps." The bullets came fast. Roman died in his chair, eyes open this time, not pretending, not calculating, not hunting, at peace. The reading of the will took place 1 week later. Roman's lieutenants arrived expecting fortunes. They received sealed envelopes instead, evidence of their crimes, delivered simultaneously to federal prosecutors. Within a month, every single one of them was in prison. His blood relatives, cousins, nephews, distant family who had never once visited, received $1 each. And a note. You know why. The lawyer paused, adjusted his glasses, then read the final bequest. "To Jack, son of Amelia, I leave everything that remains, every property, every investment, every clean dollar I spent 15 years washing the blood from." Jack sat frozen, his mother weeping beside him. The lawyer handed him an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and something else, a crumpled, faded piece of paper. A crayon drawing of a man with a too big smile. Jack unfolded the note with shaking hands. "You once stood guard for a monster and gave him your greatest treasure when you had nothing. I have spent 15 years trying to be worthy of that gift. The empire is gone. What remains is clean. Build something good with it, Jack, and keep the drawing. It hung in my office until the very end. RB."